March 7, 2026. The Philippine Navy guided missile frigate BRP Miguel Malvar is on routine patrol near Sabina Shoal, a contested atoll in the South China Sea, inside the Philippines' own exclusive economic zone, roughly 150 kilometers west of the island of Palawan. A Chinese PLA Navy vessel, hull number 622, approaches, and then it does something that is never routine. The Philippine military accused a Chinese Navy ship of directing its fire control radar against one of its vessels as it patrolled the South China Sea on March 7th, calling the move alarming and provocative. Fire control radar, not surveillance radar, not navigation radar. Fire control radar is the system that tells a weapon where to go. It is the electronic equivalent of a soldier raising a rifle, clicking off the safety and pointing it at your face while insisting they haven't fired yet. The armed forces of the Philippines said this was an alarming and provocative action that created unnecessary risk and could have led to misinterpretation and misunderstanding at sea. The situation did not escalate further this time. But this time is doing a lot of work in that sentence. And today we are going to show you exactly why. What fire control radar actually means. Let's slow down on the technical detail for just a moment because it matters enormously. There are different kinds of radar on a warship. Search radar sweeps the horizon looking for anything. Ship's aircraft contacts. It says, "I see you." Fire control radar is different. Fire control radar is a precision targeting system used to track objects and guide weapons, and locking it onto another vessel is typically seen as a serious escalation. When a ship activates fire control radar and points it at you, it means its weapons system now has your precise coordinates, your speed, your heading, everything it needs to fire. The only remaining step is pulling a trigger. This is why this incident is so dangerous, not because anyone fired, but because of what happens in the seconds after a radar lock in the mind of the crew on the receiving ship. A captain sees that targeting lock. His crew sees it. They have seconds, maybe less, to decide, is this a warning, a mistake, or the last thing we will ever see? AFP added that the situation did not further escalate, but it highlights the need for restraint and professionalism at sea. Restraint and professionalism. That is the phrase militaries use when they want to acknowledge how close something came without actually saying how close it came. In a separate incident on the same day, the Philippines also accused Chinese forces of firing flares near a Philippine Coast Guard aircraft conducting a maritime patrol near Mischief Reef, an artificial island built and militarized by China within the Philippines' EEZ. Two incidents. Same day, the radar lock on the frigate, flares fired near an aircraft. These are not coincidences, these are demonstrations. Step 1, radar lock. A fire control radar activates. Weapon system acquires target. Commanders have seconds to interpret intent. Step 2, collision, injury. A vessel is struck, disabled, or a crew member is killed. Domestic political trap closes around both governments. Step 3, MDT invoked. Manila formally invokes the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. Washington faces a decision under compressed timelines. Step 4, superpower confrontation. U.S. must choose to break the blockade militarily against a nuclear-armed power or accept a fait accompli that ends the alliance's credibility. The legal war, what the law says and why Beijing ignores it. Now let's zoom out from the radar beam to the legal landscape it sits on us, because the South China Sea is not just a military dispute. It is a legal war being fought in parallel with the physical one. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, is the international framework that defines who controls what in the world's oceans. Exclusive economic zones, territorial waters, continental shelves, all of it runs through UNCLOS. In 2016, an international arbitration tribunal convened under UNCLOS ruled, after years of proceedings, that China's sweeping claims over the South China Sea had no legal basis under international law. The Philippines had brought the case. The tribunal was clear. Chinese and Philippine ships regularly clash in the crucial waterway, which Beijing claims nearly in its entirety, despite that international ruling that its assertion has no legal basis. Beijing's response to that ruling, it called it null and void. It refused to participate in the proceedings. It refused to recognize the outcome. And it continued building artificial islands, expanding Coast Guard patrols, and stationing naval vessels, turning legal rejection into physical presence. Here is the strategic logic that Beijing is playing. The law says one thing, the ships say another, and in international affairs, ships, over time, tend to win. This is what analysts call lawfare versus presence. The Philippines plays the law. China plays the map. And right now, in the waters around Sabina Shoal and Scarborough Shoal and Second Thomas Shoal, presence is winning. The Philippine Navy said the incident underscores the importance of restraint and adherence to international law. The Philippine Navy remains committed to lawful patrols, the protection of sovereign rights, and the peaceful, rules-based resolution of disputes. Those are the words of a Navy that knows the law is on its side. They are also the words of a Navy that knows it is outgunned. The pattern, Scarborough, Sabina, and the Coast Guard machine. One incident tells you something happened. A pattern tells you something is happening. CSIS's Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, the gold standard for open-source South China Sea tracking, has documented a shift in China's Coast Guard patrol strategy through 2025. Rather than spreading pressure evenly across all disputed features, China's maritime enforcement posture concentrated on specific pressure points, Scarborough Shoal and Sabina Shoal. The two countries traded statements earlier this month claiming sovereignty over the Scarborough Shoal, a traditional fishing area for Filipino fishermen now controlled by China. This is prioritization, strategic selection. Beijing is not randomly harassing Philippine vessels. It is applying sustained, targeted pressure at the locations that matter most to Manila, politically and operationally. Sabina Shoal, where the March 7th radar lock occurred, sits squarely inside the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. The expanding presence of Chinese maritime forces within Manila's exclusive economic zone has led to periodic confrontations and prompted the U.S. treaty ally to increase military spending and deepen defense ties with Washington and other regional partners. The confrontations have included water cannons used against Philippine resupply missions, laser systems reportedly aimed at Philippine personnel, and now fire control radar pointed at a guided missile frigate. Each step escalates the menu of coercive tools. Each step tests whether the previous step produced consequences. Each step that passes without consequence signals to Beijing that the next step is available. This is not chaos. This is a method. The South China Sea carries roughly 1/3 of global shipping. The fish stocks in these waters feed hundreds of millions of people across Southeast Asia. The seabed beneath them holds enormous reserves of oil and natural gas. And right now, a single guided missile frigate is trying to assert its country's legal rights, rights confirmed by international law, against a navy that is several orders of magnitude larger, and that is testing how far it can go before someone stops it. Like if this reframed the headline for you. Comment: had you heard about the BRP Miguel Malvar radar lock? Share with one person who should know. Subscribe. This is Script 5 in a connected series covering every major flashpoint right now. The Treaty Tripwire, what the 1951 MDT actually says. Here is the piece of this story that transforms a regional maritime dispute into a potential global confrontation. The 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty between the United States and the Philippines. The U.S. State Department reaffirmed in October 2025, in direct response to Chinese actions in the South China Sea, that the treaty's commitments extend to armed attacks on Philippine armed forces, public vessels, and aircraft in the Pacific, including the South China Sea. That is not ambiguous. That is not diplomatic boilerplate. That is a legal and political commitment that says, if someone attacks a Philippine naval vessel on patrol in its own exclusive economic zone, a ship like the BRP Miguel Malvar, the United States is bound to treat that as a matter requiring action consistent with its constitutional processes. Next month, U.S. and Philippine forces are set to hold their annual Balikatan exercises, expected to include expanded joint maritime operations and scenarios focused on defense of Philippine maritime territory. The timing of those exercises, following the radar lock incident, is not coincidental. It is a signal. And here is the escalation ladder that defense analysts worry about constantly, shown in the graphic at the top of this script. Step 1, a radar lock. Step 2, a collision, an injury, a vessel seized or sunk. Step 3, Manila invokes the MDT. Step 4, the United States must choose between credibility and confrontation with a nuclear-armed power. No one in Washington, Manila, or Beijing wants to reach Step 4, but the pathway from Step 1 to Step 4 can compress into hours or less if commanders make the wrong call in the wrong moment. And commanders under pressure with incomplete information in the middle of a radar lock do not always make the right call. The East China Sea spillover, incident stacking. The South China Sea is not the only water China is contesting right now. And this is the part that transforms a bilateral dispute into a regional system risk. In parallel to the Philippine incidents, China's Coast Guard has been conducting enforcement operations near the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea, an island chain administered by Japan but claimed by China, which calls them the Diaoyus. Japan is a treaty ally of the United States too, under the 1960 U.S.-Japan Security Treaty, which explicitly covers the Senkaku Islands. So now the map looks like this. China is simultaneously pressuring a U.S. ally in the South China Sea with fire control radar locks and a U.S. ally in the East China Sea with territorial incursions. 2 alliance tripwires, 2 theaters, 1 power applying pressure in both simultaneously. This is what analysts call incident stacking. Each individual event might be manageable in isolation, but multiple incidents across multiple theaters occurring simultaneously create a systemic risk that is greater than the sum of its parts. Decision makers get saturated, communication channels get overloaded, and the chance that one incident gets misread or mishandled goes up with every additional incident added to the stack. We are currently at a historically high level of incident stacking across the Indo-Pacific. The 3 scenarios. Where does this go? 3 scenarios, honest ones, best case. Both sides establish more robust rules of the road at sea, minimum safe distances, mandatory radio communication protocols, agreed procedures for close encounters. The Philippines continues its dual-track strategy. Legal challenges in international forums combined with military buildup and deepening U.S. alliance integration. The Balikatan exercises demonstrate alliance credibility without triggering a Chinese escalatory response. The radar lock becomes a diplomatic protest note, a data point in the legal record, and eventually a case study in maritime crisis management. Not peace, not resolution. Managed friction. Described honestly, that is the best case scenario. Worst case. Low med, non-trivial. A close encounter, a collision, a vessel disabled, a crew member killed creates a domestic political trap in Manila from which President Marcos cannot retreat without losing public legitimacy. The Philippines formally invokes the MDT. Washington begins alliance consultations under enormous time pressure. Beijing, unwilling to be seen backing down domestically, doubles its presence. Washington, unwilling to abandon an ally, sends carrier assets. The situation escalates from a maritime incident to a superpower confrontation in days. The nuclear dimension is not remote, a confrontation that begins with a radar lock on a frigate near an atoll most Americans can't name can connect to strategic deterrence calculations faster than any decision maker would want, most likely. Persistent coercion with periodic spikes. Incidents at Scarborough Shoal, Sabina Shoal, and Second Thomas Shoal continue. Each one is documented, protested, publicized, and added to the growing file of grievances neither side resolves. The Philippines deepens its security relationship with the United States, Japan, and Australia. China continues to expand its physical presence and normalize its enforcement posture. The law says one thing, the ships say another, and the gap between them quietly widens. What to watch? Signals that matter. Here is your watch list. The signals that will tell you whether this is moving toward resolution or toward crisis. Watch the Balikatan exercises next month. These annual U.S.-Philippines drills have been expanding in scope and ambition. Watch whether they include scenarios explicitly modeled on South China Sea confrontations, and watch how Beijing responds publicly to them. Watch China's response to the radar lock accusation. The Chinese embassy in Manila did not immediately respond to a request for comment. When Beijing does respond, the language it uses will signal whether it intends to acknowledge, deflect, or deny. Denial sets up the next incident. Acknowledgement opens a door. Watch Scarborough Shoal. CSIS AMTI's tracking shows that China has prioritized Scarborough as a key pressure point. Any move to formalize control there, through Coast Guard presence, fishing exclusions, or physical infrastructure, represents a significant escalation with enormous symbolic weight for the Philippines. Watch for coalition building. The Philippines has been deepening partnerships with Japan, Australia, and the UK. If those partners begin coordinating maritime patrol operations in the South China Sea, sharing surveillance, conducting joint transits, that signals a multilateral response China has not yet fully had to confront. Watch Second Thomas Shoal. A deteriorating Philippine vessel deliberately grounded there serves as a sovereignty marker. China has been attempting to prevent Philippine resupply missions to the vessel. If those missions are physically blocked rather than merely harassed, the legal threshold for MDT consultation moves meaningfully closer. March 7, 2026, a guided missile frigate on patrol, a Chinese warship approaching, a targeting radar activating, and then nothing. The moment passed, the ship sailed on, the protest note was filed, the world moved on to the next headline, but the moment didn't disappear. It was added to a file that has been growing for years, a file of water cannons and laser systems and blocked resupply missions and now fire control radar pointed at a vessel inside another country's exclusive economic zone. Every incident that passes without consequence is, in the logic of coercion, a green light. And here is what I want you to understand as clearly as I can say it. The 1951 treaty exists because the people who wrote it understood something that is just as true today, that small incidents in distant waters, if left unaddressed, do not stay small. They compound, they stack, they accelerate. The radar locked, the treaty woke up, and the question, and the one that nobody in Washington, Manila, or Beijing has fully answered, is what happens the next time the radar locks and the captain on the receiving ship decides he isn't going to wait to find out. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, like this if it changed how you read routine South China Sea incident reports. And leave a comment. I want to know, do you think the MDT commitment is credible enough to deter the next escalation, or has Beijing already calculated that it isn't? See you in the next one.